There are several events that took place during the Six-Day War that are very difficult to explain. They seem to be in the area of the supernatural rather than the natural. They always seem to be working in favor of Israel. A female corporal was riding in a jeep with the regimental commander of an armor unit when she saw immediately in their path a tremendous fire that leaped up. The commander could see nothing, and the girl, thinking his sand goggles were covered with dust, yelled to him to swerve aside. He was convinced of danger because he knew the girl well enough to trust her judgment, though he couldn't see anything in their path. Still, he swung away into another opening that appeared between the sand dunes. The column of vehicles behind them followed. Only one jeep continued on the original path. All of a sudden, there was a terrific explosion in fire. The jeep that had stayed on the road had driven straight into an Egyptian minefield.
Is this just a fortuitous example of the desert sand playing tricks on someone's eyes? Or did the corporal actually see a vision that warned her of the danger ahead? More importantly, why was this war filled with so many examples of unexplained events that worked in Israel's favor?
Another great miracle happened in Sinai when an Israeli soldier which lost his unit and was alone in the area suddenly saw a unit of Egyptians, military unit of thousands of Egyptians. And suddenly when they saw him, they lifted their hands up. They walked to him, that he would take them to captivity. He was surprised. He did not believe what he saw in his eyes, but he did it. He took them to captivity. They walked after him, and he walked to the main unit that he lost. When he came to his unit, the unit was shocked. They rubbed their eyes. They didn't believe. One Israeli soldier is leading after him thousands of Egyptian soldiers with their hands up, ready to go to captivity. So they took them to captivity and immediately made a research with the Egyptian officers. What happened here? How you gave up for one Israeli soldier? And they answered, he was not alone. Together with him were thousands of angels, each one of them with a gun in his hands, ready to shoot us. And they said, we are ready to fight against Israeli soldiers. We are not ready to fight against the angels of God.
When you compare the two armies and see the size of the number of soldiers as well as the buildup of machinery, you know that it couldn't have possibly happened without some outside help. Well, if we look into the scripture, we find that Elisha also was surrounded by the enemy at one time. His servant said, what are we going to do? He said, Lord, open up his eyes. Suddenly his eyes were opened up to supernatural beings. And the same is true in this war as well. The story goes that the Egyptians were coming up onto the southern border of Israel when a hand actually came out of the sky. And as a result, they were fearful and they fled. And that was a story that has come out from the Egyptians, who said there was something that happened supernaturally.
All these stories is not mystical stories for books. This is reality in the life of Israel.
Bloody battles over the land that both sides claim as their own. When the conflict began, Syria controlled the Golan Heights, and Egypt had the Sinai Peninsula, including the Gaza Strip. By the end of the war, all that had changed. That's what makes our next story all the more mysterious.
Since 1948, Jerusalem, the center of the Jewish faith and holy to Christianity and Islam, has been a divided city. Israel controlled the western half of the city, and Jordan retained control of the eastern half, which was the old city. On June 5th, 6th and 7th, there had been fierce fighting all around the eastern flank of the old city. But on the morning of June the 7th, the third day of the war, the Jordanian guns fell silent. General Uzi Narkis of the Israeli Defense Force was leading the charge on the city. He tells us that on the fourth day, some kind of an airy calm came over the city. At the beginning, he thought that it was some kind of a trap. But the scouts told him that the city was in fact empty. The Jordanian army had left the night before, leaving all the equipment behind. And the Israel, without even shooting one bullet, the Israelis were able to enter into the city, taking the Temple Mount and reaching the West Wall.
When Israeli soldiers rolled into the old city of Jerusalem, they couldn't believe their eyes. There before them was the Wailing Wall, the only remaining wall of the ancient Second Temple that had survived the region's punishing history. In 1948, the Arabs had sealed off the old city. The Jews had been unable to come to this place, the most important place in the world to these people. Here they could give thanks and pray to the God that had watched over them for so many thousands of years. Not all Israeli soldiers believed this. Some had little or no religious conviction in their hearts. But even the unbelievers realized something significant had happened.
Was there a special significance in Israel's miraculous conquest of these large tracts of land? The same land that ancient writings promised to Abraham's descendants? And was Bible prophecy fulfilled when Israel took possession of Jerusalem?
The most important factor of the Six-Day War was the fact that Jerusalem was united. Jerusalem has been overrun 20 times, but it was never divided until 1948. And many of the prophets talked about the unification of Jerusalem, which happened in the Six-Day War.
The fact that Israel regained much of the Promised Land as a result of the Six-Day War is significant, especially in terms of the fulfillment of ancient Bible prophecies. These writings tell us that the Jews would be scattered throughout the world on 3 separate occasions. They also predicted that each time the Jews would return to Jerusalem. Well, 2 of the 3 returns came to pass in biblical times, but it's the 3rd occasion that's most significant, and that began with Israel's reclaiming of Jerusalem in the Six-Day War.
Many Bible scholars believe that when the Israelis rolled into Jerusalem on June the 11th, it marked the beginning of the end times on earth. Now, in Bible prophecy, the end times refers to a period of cataclysmic natural disasters, famine, and war that would precede the end of the world. These events will lead up to one final conflict, one horrific battle, Armageddon.